All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. So before we get into today's video, we have a sponsor for today's video, and that sponsor is The Ridge. As you probably know from our previous spots, they make high-quality compact wallets out of metal and elastic, and I've used and loved them for years. But I've recently been fond of the premium Damascus steel style. If you'd like to get yours, you can head to ridge.com/Brozime and enter code Brozime for 10% off. And thanks so much to The Ridge for sponsoring us once again. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about today is what I have decided that I am going to be bringing into the new war. Obviously, this is a as of right now. If we get any more information on what we're going to need during the new war, this might change. But this is what I've settled on as what I'm bringing into the new war, and I want to explain why. But first and foremost, this is my old Mesa fashion, and I like it. I think it's pretty good. It's a little, it's a little simple. It's like one of my older put togethers. Like whenever Mace came out, I was like, oh, this will be good. Using the coup de grace helmet and the Marlet skin. I think it looks nice. But with the looming new war and cutscenes for presumably our Warframes, I really wanted a new look. So I've gone with this. This is a nice little update using one of the new ephemera that I really like, which is the Selena ephemera, which comes from the Electric Sisters of Parvos. And yeah, I think it looks absolutely fantastic. One of the nice things about this ephemera is that it actually pulses out. You'll see it whenever we're doing the weapon show-offs and stuff. Pulses out and you can see the corpus text rotating around you, which I think is really nice. And this is just, I think, a big upgrade to the fashion that I was using one of the nice new Tenogen Sindanas, the Velesti, although it's not that new. It's been in the game for a while, but I think it looks really, really nice on Mesa, so I just wanted to show the updated fashion first before we get into any weapon show-off. So, we have a number of different weapons here, and I just want to talk about everything that I'm going to be bringing, but for that, we're going to need to head to the Simulacrum. Alright, here we are in the Simulacrum. So, for this, of course, in the new war, I don't know exactly what we're going to be fighting. But presumably, it will look something similar to this variety of sentient enemies I've decided to throw in here. Notable, however, for some reason, Conculus, outside of the decaying ones that are from the Octavia quest, are not able to be spawned in here. So I haven't been able to test against them, but they have very, very similar resistances to Battleless. So I just added a few extra in terms of killing stuff. I will say I do think that this kind of group here is more than DE will tend to send at us. And I am, because we don't know what level this quest is going to be, testing this at level 185. Also notable, DE has never sent level 185 sentience after us in any mandatory content. So, this is an extreme amount of overkill for what is even probably a realistic possibility for the new war, but you can never be too prepared. So for that, I have a variety of weapons that I have picked. I have chosen the Tenet Archiplasmor, and this weapon is mainly because this weapon has some unique use cases in that it is extremely, extremely good at hitting weak points, and it's a weapon that is extremely easy to invest into. It comes with a good amount of polarities, and of course you can see I have 5 Forma in it, but that was very, very much not required. As you can see, this 23 excess capacity that I have on here, and we're using galvanized acceleration, which is also not necessary. The build for this, especially a min build using the chilling reload even, and non-primed point blank, or a cleanse mod if you're going to be, well, we don't have cleanse sentient, so probably not in this case, but there's a variety of other things you can use. You can use savvy if you want to, but I'm going to prefer the upfront damage, I think, for a quest, because we don't know how often we're going to be running into enemies and things. But yeah, this general setup, even a budget version of this with the regular versions of all these mods, is going to be really, really powerful, and I think really get the job done. This weapon is just excellent. I would call this the all-grown-up version of the Fallman for people who have been watching the free-to-play through and seeing what an absolute monster the Fallman is in the hands of a frame like Zephyr, for example. This weapon's just good, and for anyone that's farming this, I have a magnetic one, but
Heat is also good for weighting more of your procs towards that. There are a number of good options. The only one you really, really don't want to do is going to be radiation, as that is already an inherent elemental on this weapon. But yeah, absolutely stellar shotgun that rips stuff apart and is easy to invest into for anyone looking for a good weapon to invest into. We're going to be showing this off, of course, against the Sentients. And then we have the Catabolist. This one might be a weird pick because this weapon is weird. So the reason I have chosen the Catabolist over the new core is because the Catabolist is a just-in-case weapon. The new core does something very similar, but the Catabolist really focuses down on one thing that the new core sort of does, and does it extremely well. The Catabolist is a secondary phantasma, and by that, I mean that this weapon absolutely shits status out at an unbelievable rate, and nothing that is vulnerable to status will survive under the sheer volume of the statuses that it is outputting. This weapon is just a murder hose. Like, Sentients adapting to this much damage, not going to happen. Just unrealistic, they will die anyway. Worth noting on this weapon is I'm considering putting one more Forma in, just because this weapon, if you're really using it as your main weapon, can run a little low on ammo. Throwing in the 6th Forma for this weapon just to be using an ammo mutation instead of Ruinous Extension is definitely a possibility, but I do also like Ruinous Extension just for the extra range. Probably more of a to-taste thing and what you think you're going to need, as opposed to a necessity one way or another. But this weapon, it's extremely powerful, and it'll be very clear during the tests, like, what kind of nonsense this weapon is outputting. Also, I think the reload gimmick being a grenade is super fun. And then we, of course, have just the old standby, the Redeemer Prime. So the Redeemer Prime has a few things that are unique to it, although I will note that most of the things I'm going to discuss as positives here are also going to be relative to the Vastalok. The Vastalok and the Redeemer Prime have a lot of similarities. I prefer the Redeemer Prime. Also, it's unvaulted this week, so if you don't have one, would really suggest going and farming that. But if you only have the Vastalok from, like, the drops and stuff, or, like, wherever, great. The Vastalok is going to be a great option for you. Or a Stropha. Stropha doesn't do quite the gimmick that I'm looking for here with the Redeemer Prime, but also going to be really solid for just a absolute ton of upfront damage that is going to be able to take things down very effectively. Now, the gimmick, not really the gimmick, but kind of the thing that the Redeemer gets through is that this is a shotgun, and it is a extremely high pellet count, meaning that if you run into an enemy that has a limitation on how much damage you can take per hit, every pellet is an individual hit. So if there is, like, a limit of, like, 100 damage, let's say, per hit, this would do considerably more damage than something like the Tenet Archiplasmor, which is only going to have, like, 3 waves that it's shooting out. This is going to do something like, 2,000 plus damage, as opposed to, like, the 300 limit you'd be looking at if you got all of your multi-shot off with the Archiplasmor. So this does that, in addition to having an absolutely hilarious amount of damage. This is a weapon that we use in Disruption on super hard targets. Even through a lot of just regular damage reduction, the amount of damage this kicks out is going to be really massive. Now, notably, I have nonsense for this weapon, and before we even look at it, I want to tell you, do not buy Rivens. I still think that they are unhealthy for the game. However, when the game gives me broken shit, I use broken shit. And in this case, this build looks like this, and this stupid fucking Riven looks like this. This is absolute bullshit. This is a one Riven disposition thing, and it's complete nonsense. It is complete nonsense. So I'm just going to get that out of the way right off the bat. Instead of this, you can use everything exactly the same in this build, and then just use an attack speed mod, which is not going to give you as high of a per shot damage, but is going to be able to make it fire much, much quicker. So if you have to fire twice, you're going to get that much or more damage than I'll get in one shot. So do not go try and find Rivens or some nonsense. Just use this with an attack speed mod, as that is going to do you a lot better. Also, notably, if you don't have Amalgam Organ Shatter, just use regular. As long as you have Killing Blow, you're going to be fine. So yeah, those are the weapons that I'm going to be bringing. Also, of note, I'm going to be bringing Helios for all of that sweet, sweet scanning in his nice little Lloyd skin, as I think that's quite fun. But yeah, other than that, we just have the Regulators build for Mesa, which looks like this right now, utilizing the new mods, of course. And of course, as you can see, there's a wrong polarity on here because of the updates needed for the build. So you can get this in less forma than this. And then the build for Mesa herself is part of the reason that I'm going to be bringing her instead of Protea, who is my current favorite frame. Mesa is my second favorite frame now. And there's two reasons I'm choosing Mesa over Protea. One, Mesa has a Prime, and it feels appropriate to bring a Prime. Two, Protea is not as inherently tanky as my Mesa is. Like, this build is using Umbral Vitality and has, over 1100 health, which is pretty hefty because I'm also using Adaptation. Combining that with Mesa's 3, my Mesa does not die. Worth noting, the aura here, I'm probably going to switch to like Growing Power, maybe Brief Respite, depending on how I'm feeling. Probably going to end up as Brief Respite, but I do also run Pillage, so it's kind of hard to need that on Mesa in particular. But there's a lot of good options for your slot up here. But this build really just gets shit done with Mesa. This is what I've been using for a good long time, and it's just an absolute workhorse. This is great in Steel Path. This can handle basically anything. So yeah, just being able to have like a really just generally hardy frame, especially if we get our powers taken away from us or something, I think is going to be really nice to have around. So yeah, that is where we are with the builds and such. Now let's show these off. We're going to show these off kind of individually. Except for the Archiplasmor is more of a specific tool. It can do this test by itself. It just takes a little bit longer because there's, the ramp up with the primary Merciless and such. Whereas the Catabolist really doesn't need that. But yeah, the main use for this is going to be the Aerolus. Aerolus, I would say, are probably everyone's I forgot about it, but yeah, that enemy is really annoying, that we're almost certainly going to see quite a few of during this quest if we're going to be fighting a lot of sentients. So, keep that in mind. That is this big middle guy with all of the pods that you must destroy before you are allowed to kill it. With your Archiplasmor, you can take out most of these pods in just a couple of shots, and then take this enemy down. And you can see them just like getting eaten up by the Hunter Munition slash procs from this. You can make pretty short work of these enemies, especially whenever I'm using Pillage on Mesa to take the armor down on these enemies and just get these kills. Then once my Merciless is stacked up, we're doing really solid damage. These enemies are level 185. Like, this is very likely like way, way above what we can even expect from this quest. So you consider that this is what it's doing to level 185s. If this quest turns out to be somewhere in the range like level 30, which is what we probably would expect, 30 to 50, then they're just going to get straight up evaporated by this much damage. And while I wouldn't normally, of course, like be using this on these enemies because I'd just be using Mace's abilities in pretty much all cases, you can see how effective it is at just taking these enemies down as long as you get just a little bit in there. And Aerolists are pretty fragile once you get their weak points down, and this is great at taking care of those. Now, for the Catabolist, the Catabolist is just great all around. The worst thing about the Catabolist is that it's a beam weapon that doesn't have the nice chaining that we're used to on the Gaze kit guns and also on the Nucor. So at lower levels, those weapons are always going to outperform this. But at much, much higher levels, or much, much harder to kill enemies, the amount of status that this kicks out is absolutely hilarious. As you can see, just absolutely shredding these enemies. Like the amount of status that goes on them is like just hilarious. Get the grenade throw, which is just also a huge amount of fun. I really like the grenade throw on the Catabolist, even though sometimes it kind of bugs out and you have to throw twice. But either way, yeah, like level 185. Battleists, like, just stacking so many heat procs on them, and they stand no chance. Also worth noting, like, it's okay at popping these weak points on the Aerolist, and you do stack up those heat procs while it's still invincible. So normally it'll just die the moment its invincibility ends, and those are popped. So the Catabulus, phenomenal weapon, scales extremely well. If there's anything that you're finding is vulnerable to status but won't die from your regular weapons, consider firing a Catabulus at it. And then we have the Redeemer Prime. The Redeemer Prime, this is really only for single targets. Like, I'll shoot it at a couple of guys, but then we'll probably only do like half the test, because it's really not for, you know, shooting at every single enemy that you run into. But yeah, this weapon is, you know, you're two-shotting level 185 sentience. Like, this is, you know, they're not, things don't live through the Redeemer being fired at them, nor should they. Like, the basic gist is they don't live through that. That's just what we've come to expect from the Redeemer. Weapon's been around a long time and it has been good for a long time for a great reason. Now, as for what Mesa does, of course we all know what Mesa does. She kills everyone in the room. And this, of course, combined with something like the Oh. I didn't grab shields from all the enemies. There we are. Still have to be minorly careful against these enemies. Yeah, of course can't target like the enemy with the weak points, even whenever their weak point's gone. But that's what the Archoplasmor is for, is being able to take those enemies out. Yeah, overall, like, I think this setup is massively overkill, but that's kind of the point. If there is a problem, I intend to solve the problem. Do I think there will be one? Absolutely not. I think problems are more likely to arise in one of the other sections, such as with Necromex or with the Railjack or some such like that. And that's what we're going to talk about now.